Hi, I'm Tom, co-founder of 1 Million Loops. Today we're starting a series of interviews with amazing musicians, and in some cases we are lucky enough to have them as users and enjoying their music on our platform. That is the case with our guest today, Russ Boswell. Russ is a session bass player based out of Toronto, Ontario in Canada. He has toured and recorded with some of Canada's top artists, including Serena Ryder, Hart, David Wilcox, the Partnership Club, and many others, along with hundreds of recording sessions. He can also be heard and seen in the movie Tommy Boy and on the soundtracks of The Love Guru, Pixels, Dinner at Fred's, and The Fifth State. His theater credits include Kinky Boots, Rock of Ages, Dirty Dancing, Rent, Hair, Tommy, and many others. And actually this past 2019, Russ had the pleasure and shared the stage with Sting in his musical The Last Ship. We had a very nice conversation with Russ, and hopefully you can get some tips and some good ideas on how to work on your music, on your career, on how to make it as an established session musician and a working musician. Hope you enjoy it, and see you next time. Russ, thank you so much for taking the time. It's just gonna be a quick conversations between two musicians, or a musician and a drummer. But the point here is to share your experience with others, which we think is super useful, and you have many years of experience working as a session musician and as a working touring musician. So we really love to hear about your experience and your path so far. So one of the things that we were talking about before all this started is when you started out, if you can recall that. So let's go to someone who's just starting. Just pick their bass, like in your case, or a guitar or drums. Should you devote more time to practice and trying to get scales and trying to learn how to read, or just jam and practice and try to get together with other musicians? So what would you say is the ratio, if there is one, on how you should start, the first few steps?
Well, I think right away you have to get your chops together. So practicing with a goal in mind, learning where the notes are, getting the scales together, whatever it means to you, that's pretty darn important. But they do have to go hand in hand. So you don't want to be a guy who's really good in his bedroom, has never played. So you have to play with other musicians. Earlier on, I think the technical aspect would probably outweigh the playing, but ultimately the goal is to play with other musicians. It's not going to matter how good you are on your own. So those two skills have to go hand in hand, I would say.
Right, because one of the things that I now remember happened to me, I won't say I was good, because I was not good, but I was playing in my bedroom quite a lot. I grew up in a small town, so there weren't that many people around to play with. So the best thing that I could do was just play, I'm a drummer, so I was playing on top of records, videos, whatever I could find, and then try and find other people. I wasn't that good, and the others weren't that good either. So it was, that was good, that was fun. We were horrible, but at least we were having fun, and you could actually hear after 3-4 months that we were actually getting better all together. I mean, we were still horrible, but a little less horrible than maybe 3-4 months before that. And that actually was a good feedback on when I was back playing on my own, because I had other chops, because I had to adapt to what the guitar player was actually playing. I was like, okay, that's very different from what I play every day. So would you say it's like you have to try and do both at the same time?
If you can. I mean, you want to get as good as you can, and if you don't have anybody to jam along with, just keep at it. And as you say, when you guys were playing together, you got a band. And if you can keep that ratio in, the better you get, and then the better the band gets. I don't see a downside of being better as a band ever. The only tricky bit is getting, if you're very good at practicing and then you never have the chance to play with other musicians, it could get out of kilter. So ultimately you have to be able to play with other musicians unless you're a solo act, which is a viable thing to do. But I think the goal is to be able to use your skill and all your chops with other musicians. So they do have.
Yeah, sure. So what would you say will be the difference if you're a solo act? Because there's a lot of musicians out there that is like, okay, I don't want to be in a band. I just want to be with the guitar and sing on my own. But eventually, you'll want a band, a backing band at least, or you can get whatever you have in your computer, and that could be the band. But what will be the difference if
in that case, I would just say then just go to town. Just get as good as you can. And then if you end up with a band, and this is, I'm coming more from a freelancer musician. My experience isn't as an artist or a solo artist or a front person. It's to be a musician. So faced with playing different styles and different skills versus an act that's working on something, or being in a band. Even being in a band is different than being a freelance musician trying to make a living.
And speaking of that, when you're trying to make a living, and when you're trying to be or adapt yourself to different scenarios or different environments, what would you say are the things or the main things that you have to pay attention to? Like, for example, behaving with other people, or how do you fit into, let's say there's a band that's already there and you're the new one, so you want to fit in as fast as possible, be as productive as possible, as quickly as possible, right? So what would you say are the main things that you have to pay attention to? From like the technical point of view, like reading music and being able to pretty quickly pick up, different musical styles, and the human side. What would you say are the main things that have worked for you?
Well, I think you have to learn how to listen, first of all. So if you're the new guy and if you're the new person in the band, you have to hear, you bring your skills. So you've learned how to play different styles, and you obviously know how to groove and do that sort of stuff. And you've got to assess the situation, like just sort of, if you're listening to everybody in the band, it shouldn't be an issue. You should be able to just slide in there and make music, hopefully, and keep your ears open. And maybe things you've practiced on your own, maybe they don't work in that particular band, and don't try to squeeze it into that situation. Just read the room. Play what, just make it work. And if you have preconceived notions of what you're going to play and what you're going to bring in, it could sort of be problematic.
Why?
Well, because you have to play with the other players in the band. If you have a preconceived notion, you've got licks that you're just waiting.
Right. Yeah.
You're not really listening. You're waiting to do your thing. And it's not, I don't think it's as good as just going in there and being a part of the band. So whatever it takes, in whatever capacity, and there's going to be moments where you're going to take a lead role and step out, and then you step back. So I think all those things have to be considered, maybe.
Sure. And how often would you say reading has been something that it was essential to your job? Because in my experience, most musicians, I'm a fairly good reader, but kinda. But most musicians don't read, at least in my experience. Maybe, of course, in a different professional setting, it's a different thing. But how often would you say that you get into this new situation, recording or touring, and it's like, okay, here's the music, learn that, or even don't learn it, just play it on the spot?
Well, if you don't, you're not going to have access to certain work. So it's a skill.
Right.
Be able to read. It's not everything, and there's no real one magic bullet to make a living as a musician. But if you can read, it's going to open up theater work. If there's a traveling band that's coming through town, and if they need to hire local musicians, if you can read, then you're going to be considered for those gigs.
Right.
So
Actually,
it is important, and it's a part of being able to make a living. It's not a guarantee, but it's going to be a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't think there is a single, or there shouldn't be, a single trade or a single skill that was going to, okay, you're done, you're good to go. But of course, what I think, and that's one important concept, is how's that puzzle, what are the parts of that puzzle? So it's listening to other musicians, being able to read, don't be an idiot, just respect everybody in the room, and just, especially in touring, right? I mean, when you're touring with a band and everybody's like cramped in like a van, hopefully a bus, or hopefully a plane, but it's still, you're like with a group of people 24/7. So how adaptable do you think you have to be to have a long career in that?
Well, that's a really important point. I mean, your job as a player is to be on for an hour and a half or two a day. That's all you really have to do as far as being a musician. And the rest of the time you have to be able to fit in. You got to be able to make it work. So everybody else has a job to do. The tour manager, you just got to be able to make it work. So if you're hard to get along with, it's going to be tricky to get work. So don't be late for a lobby call. And just basically, you just got to be able to make it work.
Don't be a diva.
Your only job is to play. That's it. That's when you're on. Other than that, it's the tour manager's job. See?
It's the tour manager's job is to be the babysitter for everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah.
And going back to music, and especially when I know it's your case that sometimes you're switching bands, or you're going from one recording session to the next, or one traveling band to the next, and so sometimes you're switching musical styles, right? And so especially when you go through like something heavier to something more mellow or easy listening. So how do you always match like your gut feeling to adapt it to what this style requires? Or in your opinion, what's the most important thing to do when you're, switching and doing all those changes from one day to the next? It's like, okay, metal today and bossa nova tomorrow.
I think they're all the same. If you know how to play it, if you're into playing it, there's no difference. It's a musical style. It's a vocabulary, and if you're gonna be a freelance musician and learn all those styles, if you understand the core groove of a bossa nova or whatever style you're playing, I don't know if it really has any gut reaction. It's just you're going to get in there and make that music and learn the vocabulary. Learn the different, for a drummer especially, the different shuffles. How many different ways are there? Right? So you can't You know, if you're in a Texas blues swing thing, or if you're in a Chicago shuffle thing, there's all sorts of ways to play a shuffle. So
Right.
that you're just bringing in your ears and your skill.
And did you ever like have the feeling in that journey of learning all those different musical styles or ways of playing a particular style? Did you ever had the feeling that your playing became stuck, or that you were like not good enough to certain styles or certain things? And how did you overcome that?
Yes, I think it could be a matter of just not thinking about yourself anymore. You know, maybe you're
Okay.
just focused on yourself, and stop thinking about yourself and think about what the other people in the band are doing. If you're on stage and if you feel stuck, take yourself out of the equation. Or it could be a matter of just something else in your life. Like maybe you're thinking too hard on music, and maybe you need to just go for a run or get healthy, or some family stuff, relationship, whatever. Like get the other aspects of your life in balance. That can help. And just listen with fresh ears. Listen to different styles and just enjoy it without a goal of trying to learn how to play. Just listen, you know.
Just listen and just relax, right?
Take yourself out
Right.
of the equation. Just take yourself out of the equation is what I'm saying.
Was there any styles or techniques in particular that you had to struggle with the most? Any like in particular that comes to mind? I remember in my case it was double kick, those kind of fast metal, triplet kind of fast thing, because my mind wasn't really logging into the triplet feel of both feet trying to do that and fast. And that took me, that and the Purdy shuffle, Bernard Purdy, the halftime shuffle, that took me probably like 2 years. Actually, I met the man himself. And I went to New York City and I apologized to him. Of course, we're like having a laugh, and I went to Bertland and I met him, both my wife and I, and shaking his hand, it was like, I'm trying to learn your shuffle. I'm killing it. I mean, I'm actually destroying everything that I'm doing, so I want to apologize. It was like, young man, just keep doing it. You're going to be fine. So that was funny. But the Purdy shuffle, that took me couple of years, and I think I still haven't. I'm not confident enough. I've done it in a couple of recording sessions, but I wasn't that happy about it. Yeah, I was like, that could be better.
Right, you need the Tom Sawada shuffle.
Yeah, well, the Tom Sawada shuffle is a very bad imitation of the Purdy shuffle so far.
So, I think
So, yeah.
like the technical thing, if you can't hear it, it doesn't really matter if you can play it. So if your hands go really fast, if you're not really hearing it, it's not going to work. So if you don't hear fast bebop lines, even if you can play some fast passes, you have to be able to hear it first. So your fingers or your feet or your hands can go faster than you're actually hearing it. And maybe, like for me, fast bebop lines, I just don't hear it. I could probably play it. I could play Jocko licks, but I don't hear them. So getting to the point where you find your own voice and you're just honoring what you hear rather than what you can physically play.
For all those Instagram musicians out there that focus on those super fast, amazing licks, just remember, if you can't hear it, it doesn't count.
If you can't hear it, don't try to play it. It's not going to work.
And speaking of that, and especially when you can't hear it, and getting yourself out of the equation, but whenever you're preparing for a show, so especially like before a show, you might, I don't know if you get nervous or not, maybe, with experience. One person once told me that it's not that you don't get butterflies, you just make them fly in formation. So, and I always thought that was a great analogy. It's like, okay, yeah, we all get nervous, but you have a different approach to that. So, what do you advise to do, and especially what not to do before a show?
I think everybody's pre-show routine can be different, but realize what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So for me, it's I don't really want to talk to anybody. Maybe 15 minutes before, I'll be pacing in the hallway, or I won't be in a situation where I could be pinned down in a conversation, because I just need to focus and I need to think about what I'm doing. And it's happened before where I've been in the middle of a conversation and then I'm on stage a minute later, and I haven't prepared for it. So for me, that's what it is. So I think whatever your pre-game routine is, just understand it and try to stick to it and create the environment so you're not caught off guard.
Do you warm up thoroughly before a show, or you just do a light?
No, I mean, no. If I have my bass in my hand, I might noodle away, but it's just more mental preparation.
Okay, that's particular. That's different from some other people, because some mention that they do a lot of warm up before. So when they get on stage, they're like, it's been half an hour since they've been playing their instruments, so they don't really have to. There's no effort around. So in your case, is you really don't warm up that much? It's all mental.
Yeah.
All right.
Just getting in the right headspace, creating the right zone, so you're ready to make some music.
Well, in my case, for example, is I don't drink, I don't talk to people, I warm up, and I just stay focused and calm for like 25 minutes. Any like, do you drink or like alcohol or anything, or no drinks, no nothing whatsoever?
Probably not. I mean, once in a while. It depends on the gig. Playing at a bar gig, if
it's a Christmas gig in a bar, then of course.
Yes. Obviously, you want to keep it under control.
Of course, yeah, that happened. Did you have a lot of teachers throughout your journey as a musician?
I had my first teacher was really great. He was really important in my development. His name was Lenny Boyd, and I went to him as I guess I was 18 or 19 years old, and he was able to really take me from not knowing how to play at all right through to understanding how to play jazz and chords and come up with lines and read. He taught me how to read. So he was the main influence in my early career.
Was there any other teachers after him?
There were, yes. I've had some various lessons with guys over the years, and that's been very helpful. More small things, technical things, how to approach certain tunes. So I've had one main teacher and little tips from other teachers along the way.
And what is the most important thing that you seek for in a teacher? I mean, you had one that was very important. Then you had others, but I assume that this first teacher was like the most important one. Were there any particular reasons of why, in terms of maybe the range or the techniques that he had that he could pass on to you, or the way that he taught, or things in particular. The point is, what things do you seek for or you look for whenever you're looking for an educator, a teacher?
Well, Lenny was very organized. So he would have these sheets. So this was all handwritten out. He had hundreds of sheets of baselines written. So he would, I'd walk in and he'd put a sheet in front of me and I'd read it. And then I'd read it again. And once you've read it twice, you're not reading anymore. You're starting to memorize it. Then he'd have another one and put that in front. And then he was very organized that way. Each lesson had a little trick in it. So the next one would have a little thing to trick you up. You'd have to sort of get used to those things that you would see on any kind of reading gig. And he always had great advice for if you're sight reading. Most people, it's like they're looking through the big end of a funnel. And then the small end of the funnel is just going note to note. He said, try to look through the small end of the funnel. So you're seeing you can see the whole phrase. You're always looking ahead. So if you get a little tricky passage, you can sort of see it. You're not just sort of going like this, note by note. So
yeah, like cover somebody.
Yeah, get the picture.
Right.
So he's very organized and took me through some, being able to play songs, how to read, how to get a tone, all the scales, arpeggios, things like that.
And when you were looking for a teacher, was him the only one that you ever went for, or did you do any kind of research before that, or were you looking for something in particular?
There's a college here in Toronto called Humber College, and
Okay.
bass prof there. He was the head of the bass department. So I wanted to get into Humber College, but I didn't actually know how to play bass yet. So I contacted I contacted Lenny, and I figured he's the right guy, and he was. So he took me, he taught me how to play and got me into Humber, where I was able to, be lumped in with a bunch of other musicians and learned how to play, learned how to read, learned how to play a cha-cha, play a bossa nova.
All over the place. Great. And so I guess one of the final questions here is, what would you most like to have known before you started as a musician? When you were 18 and couldn't play bass yet, before reaching out to your first teacher, and where you're now, if you had some advice to that 18-year-old Russ over there, what would you say? Could be one piece of advice, maybe two, or 11, I don't know.
If you could, it would be great to find your own voice earlier on in your career. Like you're talking about trying to master a Purdy shuffle or trying to play bebop lines. If you're not hearing it and find out what your strengths are, the sooner you find that out, I think the better it's going to be, rather than trying to force a square peg into a round hole. So finding your own voice earlier on would be great.
And that is basically playing a lot with as many people as possible, right?
But you might be the last to know what your own voice is. The musicians will probably know before you do what you have to offer. So the sooner you can get to that, the better.
That is right. Russ, anything else that you'd like to add or comment and voice it out to whoever is listening and seeing this?
Yeah, learn. If you're going to be a freelance musician, just learn a bunch of skills. The more skills you have, the more chances you are going to have of making a living. And the ability with YouTube to learn a groove, to understand a little bit about a cha-cha or a bossa nova, or learn a bunch of jazz standards. It's very accessible nowadays. And like we said earlier, there's no real magic bullet. There's not one thing that's going to enable you to make a living as a musician. So all those skills you've built up, it just means you'll make a couple of $1,000 out of that one, maybe $1,000 out of the other. And by the end of the year, you'll be able to make a living once you tack it all on. If you can read, you'll be accessible to theater gigs, maybe some corporate gigs, traveling show bands, whatever, that just need some local players. And the other thing, don't be late for lobby call. Just learn how to figure it out when you're on the road and how to get along, Figure that out early.
Get that alarm on your phone at the right time and get into the shower when you should, and be packed up and ready to go.